Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to give about 2 more minutes as folks start to arrive. Hey, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our October Early Learning Advisory Council meeting this morning. Jessica, are you able to advance the slides? We'll just run through the quick virtual meeting protocols, which I think everyone is pretty familiar with. But, just throughout the meeting today, just please make sure to yourself, unless you're speaking or responding to a question. You can always put questions in the chat. There's always a dedicated Q&A time throughout the meeting. And so all questions that are placed in the chat we'll try to get addressed. Please also, if you run into any difficulties, technical difficulties, reach out to our community engagement team through the chat, or you can also reach out through the email that's listed on the slide. Also, we always like to ask if you're able, if you can please change your screen name to reflect whether you're an ELAC member or a regional advisor or a member of the public. So if you're able to do that, you can change your screen name. That would be great. Otherwise, no need to worry. And this morning, as a way of introductions, we'd like everyone through the chat to share your name, where you're located, your role. So again, if you're an ELAC member, a regional advisor, member of the public, and what is your favorite fall beverage? We'll just take a few minutes and let everyone introduce in the chat. I enjoy seeing all the fall beverages, lots of different teas. Learning some new ones I need to try. Maybe some coffee and cider and hot chocolate. Chai. That's great. Thank you, everyone. We'll keep the introductions coming, but for the purposes of time, I'm going to turn it over to Lois so we can go through some of the state agency partner updates and feedback loop and other updates this morning.
All right, thank you very much, Enrica, and good morning, everyone. I just want to point your attention first to our August meeting minutes. They were sent out in advance for you to review. Thank you very much, Jessica. Just want to see if there are any questions or any corrections that need to be made to the minutes. Is there anyone who might need just a minute or two to glance through them? If so, feel free to raise your hand and we'll give a little bit of time for that. No? Okay. Are there any questions or any updates to the minutes that need to be made? All right, well, we'll place your vote in the chat. You can use thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. So all in favor of accepting the August meeting minutes as written, just indicate by placing the thumbs up in the chat. Or you can place it above your name. I believe it's Million. Are you listed as present for the meeting or are you abstaining? You can do a thumb sideways. Thank you. All right, Jessica, Aaron, or do we have everyone?
I was about to say, I think we're missing one, maybe two, but I think oh, there we go. I think we have a majority at least.
All right, good. I think that might be our last two. All right, thank you, everyone. So now let's take a look at the feedback loop and see if anyone has any questions. Jessica just placed it in the chat. Is there anything that we should have followed up on that is missing?
Lois, if you don't mind, I wanted to jump in and add something to the piece about the community childcare forums. So I'm not sure how I missed this, but there is actually a forum tonight in Burien at the Highline Performing Arts Center at 6 p.m. So if you want to join that, we'll be there. 6 p.m. until 7:30. I'll be there. So we'll early learning and licensing leadership. And then the rest of the years are listed in the feedback loop. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Jessica, thank you for dropping that link in. It's not too late to register for those who are going to attend. I know for myself, I'll be attending in December virtually because I really want to see the BP debate this evening.
Am I not as interesting as the VP debate, Lois?
It's not personal, Erin. It's not personal. I promise you.
Yeah, we've got some stiff competition tonight. So
Yes,
that's
you
how it
do.
goes.
But just to encourage folk who cannot attend, they're all across the state. And Marlene just dropped a message about the upcoming forum. So if you can attend tonight, great. But there are some other options in Vancouver. There's and then again the virtual option that will be available on December 10th. So we still have Tacoma Lakewood, which will be on Monday, November 4th at Clover Park. And then there's also, again, the virtual forum. So just encourage everyone to attend one, if not more. I believe that the one this evening will be, I know a couple of folks who said they'd be in attendance, so it should be good. All right, any other questions about the feedback loop? All right, so we're going to move on then to our state agency partner and regional coalition updates. If there's any questions or comments, and as well as if any of our regional coalition partners have something that they want to add. Coalition members, anything you'd like to add, share out that we may not have mentioned?
I think, did you just call on me for that?
Any coalition member?
Oh, sorry. Okay. I thought you said my name. Sorry, Lois.
No, no worries.
Lois,
don't-
I do see a hand up.
Oh, Ruba?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm from the Regional Coalition and representing Pierce County. I work for Pierce County Early Childhood Network. So just I guess some updates that we have is we have this big event coming up. That's like a traditional thing we do at PCCN. It's called Champions for Children. So every year on October and for this year, the date is October 11th. So we have community members nominate 5 champions for children rights, and they're actively advocating for children 0 to 5 and doing a lot of early childhood work and supporting teachers and communities and families and young people. So this year we are celebrating like 5 champions. And this is going to be a big event happening on October 11th. I've already sent out the flyer and things like that. For other updates, we do have our Advocacy Day coming up, and we are working with a direct lobbyist, and we have decided on a legislative ask, which is $2 million for PCECN. So that's about it for like updates. Other than that, we have like so much work going on, and right now we're just like really focused on our Advocacy Day that's coming up and legislative ask. But that's about it from Pierce County.
And just for those know, so PCECN is Pierce County Early Childhood Network. I believe that is correct. Ruba, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Pierce County Early Childhood Network, which is an initiative of First 5 Fundamentals. Washington Communities for Children is also part of First 5, and that's more of like the statewide network. And folks in this space, they're also part of WCFC. And they might know about that work as well. So we do similar work, but we're more like focused on Pierce County, and WCFC is more like a statewide. So it's focusing on 10 counties and oversees 10 counties.
All right, thank you very much. Representative, I see your hand up.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for your great work on such an important topic. We're very grateful. I would love to connect with the Pierce County folks on your $2 million ask. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but our budget this upcoming session is going to be incredibly tight. And you may have heard that before and thought, they say that every year. That's not the case this year. So it's going to be a really difficult lift, even 2 million. In fact, on the House side, we've been asked to identify anything over 1 million. We need to let the budget team know right away that we're even contemplating it. Doesn't mean we're going to get it, but we're even thinking about it. And so I just want you all to know to set expectations appropriately and accordingly on the operating dollars, because a $2 million ask sounds very little, but in a budget that's going to be very difficult and anywhere from 3 billion onwards up, depending on the outcome of initiatives on the ballot in November, that it may even create a larger hole. So just as you think about your budget asks, be realistic. And I would love to connect with the Pierce County folks if you want to reach out to my office to have that conversation. Thank you. Sorry to bring the gloom on a sunny day.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I see Ruba put her email in the chat. And I also put a link to the Tacoma event in the chat for you too.
Great.
So.
Yeah, Ruba, please contact my office. I don't generally do chat stuff. So if you could just reach out to my office, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, so for anybody else, Ruba placed her email in the chat, so feel free to grab it. And if there are any other comments or questions? All right, well, I'm going to introduce Ashley Davies from the Department of Health, and she's going to provide an update about the program they have that supports providers in order to figure out if there is lead in their drinking water. It's a free program. It's a great program. So looking forward to hearing from Ashley. Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks so much for the intro, Lois, and awesome. My slides are up. I was going to ask about that. So yeah, thank you all so much for the time this morning. Really appreciate the opportunity just to share about our program. As Lois mentioned, I'm Ashley Davies. I'm with the Washington State Department of Health. I'm in our Environmental Public Health Sciences Department, and I am the program coordinator for our Lead in Childcare Drinking Water program. Next slide, please. So our program, we offer free mail-in water testing for lead and copper for childcare and early learning sites across the state. There's absolutely no cost involved for the childcare provider. We are funded through the Environmental Protection Agency WIN grant, which stands for the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nations Act, which is quite the word salad. And we are thrilled. We have just been funded for an additional 2 years through 2026. So very thankful that our program is being refunded to continue on for a couple more years. So we are focused on testing for lead and copper in water that is used for drinking and formula and food preparation. This aligns directly with DCYF's WAC requirement for the water testing for childcare and early learning sites. This also requires the childcare providers to test upon licensing and every 6 years after. So our program is available for those who are getting licensed for the first time. And then our overall goal for this program, we definitely want to protect youth from lead exposure. We know there's a lot of different sources of exposure, water being one of them. We know that lead is a neurotoxin, can really affect development, especially for our little ones, age 6 and younger. So definitely trying to do what we can to identify lead exposure and then prevent that exposure from happening in the first place. Next slide, please. So how does our program work? We are pretty much web-based. We do ask that each participant complete our online registration form that is linked directly to our webpage. It's a 10-question survey, shouldn't take our participants more than 2 or 3 minutes. Once we receive that information, our program mails out all needed water testing supplies. Our child care providers, they collect their own water samples, send them back to our lab for testing. We include all instructions, all supplies, shipping labels, everything that the participant needs to complete this process. Once the participant sends the samples back to our lab, it typically takes between 2 and 3 weeks to process those results. Once we get them, we email them directly to our participant with next steps. Next slide, please. So results, we pretty much have 2 options here. No action is needed. We're not finding any actionable lead levels for the water fixtures that were tested. Or the second option, action is needed. At least 1 water fixture tested at or above that action level. Action levels for lead are 15 parts per billion and 1,300 parts per billion for copper. These are the levels that are set by the EPA, and these are the levels that DCYF follows within their ELAC regulations. There is some buzz that these action levels will be lowered over the next year or 2. Nothing's finalized yet. There's just some rumblings going on about that. And our program will definitely be updated to follow those new guidelines as they come out. And per EPA, our grant requirements, our WIN grant requirements, we do publicly post our water testing results on our webpage, which is where you find all of our program information. Next slide, please. So ideally, we'd like to send the letter that no action is needed, stating that all of the fixtures that the child care provider or early learning site tested were under that action level. At that point in time, we do ask that the participant send the results to their licensor, keep a copy on site at their facility, and unless there's a change within that building with the plumbing, obviously if there's a building move, they only need to test their water again within 6 years to meet that DCYF requirement. And then next slide, please. So if action is needed, I send out an email to the participant with our DCYF point person, kind of about what those actionable levels are and what next steps are. So immediately we ask that the site take that problem fixture out of use and post that do not use for drinking, cooking, put some signage up at that particular fixture until a long-term solution is figured out. And so this is when my investigative skills come into play. I didn't ever realize I would learn so much about plumbing and water testing with this job. But I just try to get more information about what's going on with that fixture. Has it been in regular use? How old is the building? What factors could potentially be playing a role in these high lead levels? So once we kind of figure out a plan forward, if the fixture does need to be replaced or plumbing does need to be replaced, I'm so incredibly thankful to say that our EPA grant does allow us for remediation funding. So we can actually fix these plumbing fixtures and actually fix the plumbing itself if it's that extreme. And that will be part of our funding process for the next 2 years. So yeah, it's pretty rare within environmental public health that, you know, we identify a health risk and then we actually have the funding to make it better. So very thankful that our program allows for that. And then once we come up with a solution, either it being a flushing method or a fixture replacement, we do provide that follow-up testing to make sure that the lead has dropped below that actionable level. So that's kind of our quick process from beginning to end. And then DCYF is looped in for this whole process as well. That's something that I keep tabs on. Okay, next slide, please. So I know that was just a really quick run through of our program. Definitely want to make sure that folks are available of the services that we have. We have our program flyers in English, Spanish, and Somali. Jessica, I see you posting those. Thank you so much. Our webpage is definitely the best way to get our program information. Our registration link is right there in the second paragraph. If anybody has issues with it, please feel free to contact me directly, or you're welcome to reach out to our basic, kind of more generalized email. And I would love to hear from you all if there's any other opportunities for me to let folks know about our program. I just want to make sure that we have the word out there to prevent lead exposure in our kiddos at these sites. And just one more side note that I thought about. From what I understand, our program is open to any site that serves those who are 6 and under, so they don't have to be a licensed DCYF program. I know that our program does extend to the, oh gosh, I hope I get this right, the FFN, the Friends and Family Network, I believe it is what it is. So we're just really trying to target establishments that serve those who are 6 and under to get water tested. So okay, I think that is it for me. I'll pop in my email and a link to our website. Thank you for that last slide. There's my phone number. If anybody wants to call or text with me, that's a super easy way to get in contact. Family, friend, and neighbor. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, let me pop that in the chat. Jen, thank you. I'm glad it was an easy program. We've really modified this program over the last year and a half to make it as simple as we can for our childcare and early learning sites. So yeah, any feedback also for participants who have used it, always welcome for that. Okay, any quick questions real quick? I'm going to hang out for a little bit too this morning on the call if there's some questions that come after. But once again, really appreciate the space and the time this morning. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for taking time to come and share about such an important program. And we do actually have a few minutes. So I just want to check in with everyone just to see, are there any, does anyone have any questions for Ashley at this time? And certainly feel free to come off mute or place your questions in the chat.
Yeah, if there's any groups that you all think that this information would be important to share with, I'm more than happy to get that out as well. So
not seeing anything come into the chat at this moment, but certainly if questions do pop up, feel free to enter those in the chat. And I know, Ashley, you said you'd be able to hang around for a couple of minutes or that.
Yeah, I'll be around for a little bit. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to make a transition, and I'm going to introduce DCYF's Child Care Subsidy Program Administrator, Jason Remeinke, and Child Care Administrator Matt Judge, and they are both here to gather feedback on the new Child Care and Development Fund rules around enrollment-based pay and prospective payment. So I will turn it over to Jason and Matt.
Hi, everyone. I'll go ahead and get us started. Again, my name is Matt Judge. I'm the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Administrator at Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And joining me is Jason Remeinke, the Child Care Subsidy Program Senior Administrator. What we're going to do today is discuss the topic of some new federal Child Care and Development Fund, or CCDF, requirements that really present some opportunities for DCYF and our Working Connections Child Care Subsidy Program to improve. And we're going to hopefully get your advice on how we can dive into some of the topics that come up around implementing these new requirements, specifically for interacting with provider supports to get their feedback on some of the specifics. So you'll get a sense of the first questions that come to DCYF's mind collectively when we think about implementing some of these changes. Before I get started and launch into our agenda, I thought it would be strange of me if I were present with you all today to not give you a little bit of an update on another topic. I don't want to sidetrack us with discussion of it. I will provide written and further update separately. But just wanted to let you know that last week DCYF received notification that we did receive approval of our application for the Preschool Development Grant 2024 renewal grant and our full amount that we asked for. So that's a bit of great news for my team. We worked very hard on that application with a lot of support from folks inside and outside DCYF. So I'm excited about that. I will update you separately on that topic. Next slide, please. So turning back to CCDF and Working Connections Childcare, this is our agenda for today. I'm just going to provide you a little bit of hopefully review and context around these new CCDF requirements, give you a chance just to take in the actual language from CCDF rules so that we're oriented to our topic today. And then Jason is really going to dive into the heart of some of the topics that come up in Working Connections and implementing these new requirements. So we'll tell you what we know from further interaction with the federal grantor and how these changes interact with our system, how we might implement them, and some of the questions and decision points that come up for us. And then we will break into separate groups where you can dive into the topics that are of interest to you and give us your thoughts about the questions that we have, whether they're good ones to dive into with provider supports, other topics we may have missed that you want to discuss within these, or other discussion points that provider supports might want to weigh in on. So that'll be our time together today. Appreciate the opportunity to engage with you about this important subject. So next slide, please. So I think we've been before ELAC and provider supports on this topic before. So hopefully this will just be a little bit of review, but back in the spring, the Federal Child Care and Development Fund grantor, the Administration for Children and Families, finalized some changes to their federal rules. So these are like the WAC, but on a federal level that govern Child Care and Development Fund, CCDF. CCDF funds a lot of a big chunk of our Working Connections payments to providers, the benefits that families receive under Working Connections, as well as lots of other activities that DCYF engages in the early learning sphere. So when changes come about in the CCDF rules, we're required to comply with them on the timeline that we can within our regulatory environment and the funding that we have as soon as we can. So these are changes that we need to implement in Washington State. And we have time and the opportunity in front of the legislature next session to direct us on that. But the main idea behind these changes, the ones that are new for Washington State, is the idea is to align the Working Connection subsidy payment as much as possible with the way that providers, ECE providers are paid in the private market, so that there is ample incentive, every incentive for providers to accept the child care subsidy, so that we increase access to early care and education for all families across our state, and the highest quality, so that we see the outcomes for kids that we're really aiming for. So we're aligned with those changes that the federal government is implementing. The specific ones that we're focusing in on are paying providers prospectively prior to their providing services. So when I pay for childcare for my daughter, I'm paying, for the month. I just paid today for October. I'm not paying back for September. So the federal government wants us to align Working Connections childcare so that we do the same there, that providers receive that subsidy payment ahead of the month of service. Similarly, when I pay for my daughter, I'm paying for the entire month, no matter how many days that she's showing up. And so the federal government wants the CCDF program to operate the same way as well, providers being paid based on their enrollment rather than attendance. In Washington State, we have a pretty progressive absent day policy, but there's still a little bit of an opportunity to do more in terms of enrollment-based pay beyond what the absent day policy allows. And so that's kind of the opportunity in front of us with these changes. Before I move to the next slide, I don't want to forget to mention that there are numerous areas in the new federal requirements where Washington was already compliant with a change that was new for lots of other states. That's because, you know, Washington has a really strong subsidized childcare program and ECE program in general under CCDF. So these are just a couple of the areas where they got out a little bit in front of most states. Most states need to make a change to come into compliance with these couple of requirements, and so we're in good company for that. Next slide, please. In case you're curious, here's the specific language within the federal rules that governs some of these things. So they're directing states to ensure timeliness of payment to childcare providers by paying in advance of or at the beginning of the delivery of services to children receiving assistance under CCDF. So that's the prospective payment piece. And then they're saying we want to support providers and the fixed costs of providing childcare services by delinking their payments from the child's occasional absences by paying based on enrollment. So again, I mentioned that we do pay for absences, but paying fully on enrollment is really, you know, going that extra 5% and making sure that providers are being paid based not on a child's attendance and their occasional absences, but just based on enrollment. You see mention of an alternative approach that's only allowable if the state can demonstrate that it's impossible for them to pay based on enrollment. That's not the case here. So we're really looking to move to enrollment-based payment. And then to complete the picture on enrollment-based payment, this sub 3 just talks about paying providers on a part-time or full-time basis rather than paying for hours of service or smaller increments of time. We already have the full day and part day payment in subsidy, but really going fully to enrollment-based pay takes that to the next level. So that's kind of the other side of the coin for enrollment-based payment. So those are the 3 areas that support the 2 new changes that we're trying to come into compliance with. So I see that chat is active. I'm just going to check in with it right now before I turn it over to Jason. Does this M1, Lois asks, mean that payments will move to providers being paid at the beginning of the month? In general, my general answer is yes, and I won't go any farther. I'll let the expert Jason talk more about what that exactly means, and he's going to take it from here. There was another question about when this is taking effect from Danielle. So that really depends on DCYF doesn't have the authority to make that decision because we require a little bit of new funds to implement this change, and really the legislature would need to make the decision about when and how to fund that and when it's going to happen. I can say that the federal government recognizes that many states are in the exact same situation where they can't take any action until the legislature makes a decision, and so they've made waivers available. Those waivers states can request, they can apply for by the end of this November, and they are effective through August 2026. So DCYF is one of many states that will be requesting waivers on this so that the legislature has the time to act. And then another question from Lois, another stumper. How will this impact emergency closures for snow, power outages, etc.? Jason may have been thinking of this one, but I hadn't thought of it yet. So that might be a really good one for us to talk about with provider supports in particular.
Matt, I see a hand up from Senator Wilson.
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in and say that I just got back from the White House along with Rep. Sen and Rep. Levitt and also Rep. Fossey, where this was very much part of the conversation, and so glad to have it today out here in for folks to provide input in, because very much this is the way we need to move, and something that I've been talking about for a while. So way more permissive in nature than ever has been before. And I don't know if you'll talk about it, but also interested in also their interest in thinking about income eligibility and what income looks like and how we're counting income, which is something else I'll be looking into, because we can't change FPL, but what we can do and do have permission to do is really consider what current status of our state and also the nation is with families. So anyway, just wanted to put a plug in there for this is very much top of mind, and going to be really appreciative of the input that this group is able to give. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Couldn't agree more. Susan Brown asks, how will payment be impacted if classrooms have to close due to staffing challenges, given that maintaining ratios is extremely difficult when staff call out sick? That is certainly another topic for us to dive into. So I don't have the answer right now, but we can certainly discuss that. I will jump to the next slide and turn it over to Jason to really start zooming into some of the details here.
Thanks, Matt, and I appreciate everybody's questions in the chat. I'm Jason Mikey, Senior Child Care Subsidy Administrator. I'm here to talk about and discuss some of the policies that we're kicking around at DCYF and tie these questions back to those federal policies that Matt just covered. Just to highlight, we have a series of questions on our tables. Those are questions that we'll break into small breakout sessions at the end of our presentation for everybody to pick and choose the questions that you'd like to have feedback on. There are some very specific detailed questions, and then there's some higher level questions about how to move forward with this. The next 3 slides, we have the assumption at the top, and then a breakdown of what we know, things that are still in process, and some questions to discuss those areas. For example, the first assumption is that DCYF will pay providers based on the care authorized when children are enrolled with a provider. This covers both enrollment and prospective-based payments in the CFR that Matt highlighted. It is very difficult for us to separate prospective payment and enrollment-based payment when both become a requirement because of the timing and the nature of payment. So what we know, DCYF will pay providers based on the social service payment system at the deadlines prior to the month of payment. So for ongoing authorizations, providers will be paid usually right before the beginning of the month. For new providers, will be paid as soon as SSPS is able to process that invoice and pay based on the amount of care authorized. The things that we have to work through in this process is that there will be new timelines for changes that impact authorization. Take our summer processes, for example. July payments will be made in June. So the rate changes for the different age groups and the school age process is going to happen in June ahead of July instead of in the month that care is being provided and after the fact. This also has impacts for provider changes that we'll discuss a little bit more. We also know that providers will still maintain attendance records for both licensing and subsidy requirements. The piece that's in process there is that provider payments audits will be streamlined to align with new attendance requirements. We haven't figured out what those attendance requirements are, speaking to all the questions about closures and the different types of closures and the different reasons for families do not attend. We do know current guidance from Office of Child Care is that federal funds may not be used for more than one provider for the same child at the same time. So we are working with the Office of Child Care for additional clarification. But the question here, going back to the questions in the chat that started this conversation, families will need to plan and report provider changes in advance. And the question is, how will this impact providers and families? And good feedback there is, what happens if a provider closes and that family has already received payment for that month based on the enrollment, but that family needs to go to another provider because that family needs to work and needs childcare. Working Connections is already paid for a time and enrollment slot for that child. How do we handle that? Is a good place for feedback. Let's move to the next slide. The assumption on this slide is that the responsibility for correct payment transitions from providers to DCYF. This impacts, again, both enrollment and prospective-based payment. What this means is, today, providers currently follow billing policies to claim correct payment that they're eligible for. This includes ensuring that they're meeting all licensing and subsidy requirements, their capacity is met, their ratios are met, they're caring for the children of the correct age within licensed hours of operation and meeting all attendance requirements. Providers receive their invoice at the end of the month and attest that they met all those requirements and receive payment. In the future, DCYF will need to verify child enrollment as well as provider eligibility, such as capacity, age, and hours of operation, because the payment is going to be made ahead of services based on enrollment. To ensure proper payment, those requirements are going to have to be met. The discussion here is, what are the best ways to go about verifying enrollment, and how should DCYF verify other eligibility requirements such as capacity, hours of operation, and age groups, and those types of things. DCYF will need to stop payment when children stop attending or become disenrolled. The question here is, what is the time frame where no attendance will lead to disenrollment? Many states do this differently, including if the child stops attending in the month that has already been paid, that there can be some recovery. Is the question for the group is 1 month of no attendance the right timeline for Washington, meaning providers will receive 2 months of payment, which is a little different than some of the other state models that I mentioned. You see where there's lots of questions that we have to work through, and I see there's some questions in the chat. We'll go through those here in just a minute. Let's go to the next slide. And this is our last slide for very specific assumptions. DCYF can simplify authorizations by standardizing full-time care based on section M3 of the CFR Matt shared for both enrollment and prospective payment. Today, DCYF authorizes 23 full days to account for 5 days a week of attendance. DCYF would like to standardize payment to 22 full days, or during school year 17 half days and 5 full days for school-age children September through June. The question is still in process is, should authorizations continue with daily units, or should we transition to a monthly unit or rate? And we'd like to ask this group and also the provider supports group if there's a preference on moving to a monthly unit. Let's move to the next slide. And we have some discussion elements that are a little bit more focused on ELAC members. Given the CFR and the operational processes we shared, are these the correct questions to take to provider supports? What other questions should we ask? And is there any other guidance that ELAC has for DCYF? I see a number of questions, and I think we'll try to take an inventory of those, and we can come back. And while we're in smaller groups, maybe Matt and I can take an attempt and answer some of these in the chat. Excuse me, sorry. We do have a smart sheet set up where we can break into smaller work groups, and everybody has a link now in the chat where you can provide feedback to some of these specific questions.
So we'll be breaking into small groups. Just how long we want everyone to discuss?
I think there was a plan for allowing enough time for everyone to give feedback. I'm hoping Erin has the time for breakouts.
Yeah, I believe we started, we're gonna start with about 20 to 25 minutes, then check back in. Does that work for you guys? And so we can start with 20 minutes and then we can check in at the 20-minute mark and see how things are going. For each of the rooms, there's going to be a CE rep in each room, Marlene, Jessica, and myself, and we'll be there to assist in note-taking. However, it's optional to have us in there, so if you guys would prefer to handle it yourselves, we'd be happy to jump out back into the main room, but we'll be joining you for the initial part to get you guys set up if you need us.
Erin, I believe for this part, we have 25 to 45 minutes in the agenda. So maybe we should at least go with 25 and check in at that point versus 20 to give people more time.
Thank you, Lois. Yes,
Sorry.
thank you for catching that. Yeah, well, let's start off with 25.
I think everybody's coming back, and I think we have a few minutes set aside for larger group discussion or questions or anything that may have come up that we want to discuss before moving on to the next topic. I see a comment that's asking how long the forum will be active. We're going to use a very similar form with a couple of the final questions, different for provider supports. I think we can leave that up for at least a week. I am looking for some technical guidance on the smart sheet. If a week isn't enough, we can leave it up for 2 weeks, I think. Any feedback on that timeline is definitely appreciated. So we'll leave it up. We'll leave it up for a week. I appreciate y'all allowing Matt and I to come and discuss enrollment-based and prospective-based payment and discuss at a high level the federal policies and some of the very detailed operational questions that we are beginning to wrestle with, and appreciate your feedback. I've seen some of the feedback in the Smart Sheet already, and look forward to the questions and feedback as we continue to work through implementation. And I'm sure this won't be the last time you hear from Matt or myself on this topic.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Well, thank you, Matt and Jason. And we still have a few more minutes. I just want to do a final check-in just to see if anyone has any remaining questions or comments they would like to share now that we're back as a full group.
Enrica, since we have some time, do you think it's possible for the CE scribes to just share out a couple of thoughts?
I think that would be great, because we do have 10 minutes before at noon. We will give everyone a break, but we do have 10 minutes, and it might be really nice to hear just a little bit of feedback from each of the groups.
I can share some common themes from my group, and please feel free to jump in those in my group. I'm looking at Susan. I know you had some comments, but there was comments around just needing more guidance around these questions. And then also another big one was, what if these are federal rulings, if there was more explanation around what it is and how it can impact us, and acknowledging the challenges that childcare providers are facing, and being aware of those before getting these questions, just acknowledging the challenges for childcare providers from multiple areas, not just DCYF. So I think those are like two big things that came up.
I'll just add that what I was referencing was context. So they were asking, like, what questions could we ask, or should we be asking, or how should it be reframed? And I said that because I don't know what federal requirements, because this comment was made that these questions are based on federal requirements. But because we don't have the context of what the federal requirements are that these questions are asking, we don't know if those questions are appropriate or going to answer the questions you're getting at. So I think if you did, the federal requirement says X, and this is what we want to get at, then we could offer feedback that could be helpful. But right now, without the context, it's like, how do you answer the question when you don't really know what you're trying to get at? And then the other context that is missing often when these surveys or questions come up is what's happening in the day-to-day lives of providers. So my big point was, whatever we do no harm, and don't ask more of providers. Those would be my big picture things. Is that fair, Marlene?
I think what that highlights, thanks for that comment, Susan. That's really helpful. I think what that highlights for me is that it bears explaining, like when we bring this to provider supports, that the federal requirements, in many cases, this one included, are broad, and they don't tell you specifically, you must do, when you do enrollment-based pay, it's got to look like this, this, and this. What we're trying to get to is a system that frankly passes the straight face test, that it is an enrollment-based pay, because you can go so many different directions with that and make sense with the system, the way it operates in Washington State, by which I mean, we have a voucher-based payment system. We don't pay families directly. So how do we make enrollment-based pay work for us? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, to me, what that means is that it's less about what the specific federal rule says we have to do, and more about how does this work in Washington, and how is it going to work for the providers, given what they're used to with subsidy and working with families who receive subsidy. Does that make sense?
But even that is important context, because some of us don't know all the back end workings. And so then that's probably where your questions are being derived from, but I have no idea what it is.
Right, and that's why I was thinking when we talk to provider supports, we need to be saying the federal rules don't get into the nuts and bolts of how this has to work. What needs to happen is our existing system is understandable to somebody who's been navigating it, and we get it to enrollment-based pay in a way that makes sense.
Can I just also add, sitting in the White House, there was an adamant conversations around this is permissive and we need to make sure our states are doing it. So I will also add that nationally, and you know, we are further ahead, although it probably feels like we're behind, than many other states across the nation. However, it was very much this is what needs to be happening, and that's why we were all gathered there, not only to find out what was going on in states that had made great gains, but also what the national kind of landscape was, and also the interest in the feds of making sure these things are happening. So people like myself, Rep. Levitt, Rep. Sen, Rep. Fossey can ask those very questions and make sure that we are doing this. And again, it's because of the acknowledgement. This is one piece, right? This doesn't take care of everything. We know we've got other things, but very clearly an acknowledgement. This is about economic recovery. You are the strategy for getting us back on. So anyway, yeah, it's so important.
Thank you. Aaron or Jessica, I'm just checking in with the other scribes, I believe. Any feedback that you'd like to share with the larger group?
I can share a little bit about my group, but if anybody wants to come off mute and talk about it, feel free. I submitted the smart sheet. I wish I had all the notes in front of me, but our group spent time talking about potential challenges that advance notice could create for families, while also recognizing the need for, you know, having proper planning and documentation. And so I'd say we spent a good amount of time like in the weeds talking about the practical impacts that might have on both ends. And kind of a similar conversation with the 30-day advance notice, whether longer would be better or would that create a new set of problems to navigate. So yeah, we spent a good amount of time in the weeds kind of talking about impacts to providers and families. I don't know if anybody from my group wants to add to that.
I'll just say that, you know, the challenge is making sure that we're providing providers or keeping them whole if there's an absence of a child. And they know that there's a long waiting list of folks who need that space, but also honoring families' dynamics and challenges that they have. And they need a shorter ramp off than a month or 45 days that they need to give. And so trying to find ways to accommodate families and family needs while at the same time keep our providers whole. So making sure that we're not so prescriptive that if it's not on a list, they can be bounced or they can be required to pay a full month or 45 days if they're not able to do so. Because I mean, those that we're talking about in ECAP and some of these programs, they just don't have additional funds lying around to pay for a service they're not getting. And so I'm just being thoughtful and not prescriptive to allow the flexibility for both providers and children was kind of our premise. And how we do that is all up to you. But that is the kind of overall principle and philosophical mandate, if you will, of trying to figure out that.
Thank you for that. And I think there was a third group. Anyone from the third group? I'm not sure who took the notes. So anyone from group number 3 wish to share out?
So I took the notes for group 3 and like Erin's group, we got into the weeds on questions 1 and 2, but I think overall the consensus was for question 1, if this recommendation stays at mid-month, having DCYF continue to pay for the following month, that would keep the provider whole while giving families flexibility. However, there was quite a few people that recommended 1 month with having emergency situations, kind of specifically scenarios spelled out. But then they also wanted clarification for tribes, and I apologize if I got this wrong, military programs for civilian providers. And so I submitted all of those notes, and then for question 2, they talked about expanding what's already in the current system and having licensors capture this, and it's in childcare check. And please someone speak up if I misunderstood anything. But it was also mentioned when authorizing care, having providers sign an attestation that they'll be providing care for certain children. And then there was also mention what families, providers connected to the military, what they're doing currently with the Department of Defense. And providers are saying that system's overly burdensome and they shouldn't move towards that. And then we got into more discussion on question 3. That maybe streamlining it with ECAP, which is 45 days, and having exceptions where staff can approve that. It would be nice if family care for providers were aligned with that as well. And then there was talk about as long as parents acknowledge and sign the provider's policy, as well as giving them written handbooks instead of everything being virtually online.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everyone. It's really helpful to get a flavor of just such the rich discussion that was taking place in the various breakout groups. So it'll be great to see all the full notes from these various conversations. And also, I noticed there was a comment made in the chat or a question. It reads also, how are these supports working within our tribal communities? I didn't want to miss that. But thank you again, Jason and Matt. It is 12:01, and we have scheduled a break for everyone. So I'm going to give everyone a break, and if you could all come back at 10 after 12, then we will move into our final agenda item for the day. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. It is time for us to start again. We are going to move on to our early care and education access living wage proviso. The DCYF Early Care and Education Access Project Manager, Diana Stokes, is going to provide a progress update on the Early Care and Education Access and Living Wage Proviso, including what was heard across the state during various engagement opportunities and the initial recommendations that will be put forward in the implementation plan. So Diana, are you ready?
I am. Yes. Thanks,
Right.
Lois. And
Thank you so much.
yes. And thank you, everyone. I'm glad to join you this afternoon. This day has flown by, so I appreciate you all hanging out today. As Lois mentioned, my name is Diana Stokes, and I'm with DCYF. I'm the Early Care and Education Access Project Manager. As we move forward in this next slide, I just want to lay the foundation that as DCYF, our vision for early learning is to have an integrated mixed delivery system of affordable, high quality early care and education for all of Washington's children, supporting their child outcomes, school readiness, and family well-being. This directly aligns with several of our strategic outcomes, primarily that 80% of Washington children will be ready for kindergarten, and that we will be able to provide high quality early care and education available for all in Washington. And doing both of these, our goal is to eliminate racial disproportionality and advancing racial equity in early education. This aligns with the access and living wage proviso. So this next slide really shows that we have two pillars to this work. So with this work, we are tasked with developing an implementation plan that outlines how families will pay no more than 7% of their family's annual income, and also increase and uplift our early care and education workforce with living wages and benefits. We know that we're going to build on our existing foundation to strengthen our integrated mixed delivery system of affordable, high quality care, because we recognize that families need choices in the type of care that they receive. And then we also want to support the children as they move through from early learning and transitioning into K-12 system and beyond, and being adults here in Washington. Through this work, we have worked with some assumptions. This next slide really highlights what some of these assumptions have been. I'm going to pause for that. There we go. So the assumptions are that we're using existing planning efforts and system development. So we're not recreating the wheel. We know the cost of quality care rate model is the framework for achieving living wages and benefits. We are not creating a parallel program for childcare when we think about delivering our subsidy system. While there may be needed changes for childcare licensing standards or early achiever standards, they're outside of the scope of this project in general. And we recognize that we're not going to replace or reduce any of the existing care options for families. We really want to maintain that parent choice. So this next slide kind of shows where we're going with this. In the decision packages, there's information about ECAP entitlement, working connections, childcare eligibility expansion, and getting closer to that cost of quality care rate model. These are really laying the foundation for access and living wage and supporting this work. In this next slide, it's going to highlight the timeline. There's an arrow indicating where we're at. If you were with us previously earlier in this year, you'll recognize it's the same slide, but we've progressed this work. Again, this work really got kicked off with the Fair Start for Kids Act getting passed in 2021, and a lot of work has happened up to this point. We're in the part where we're transitioning and having our status update report ready in the next couple of months, as the full implementation plan is not due until after the legislative session ends. And so we'll have that implementation plan submitted by June 30th of 2025, and that will really outline what's happening. Our next slide really talks about what's going to be the difference between a status update and the implementation plan. So the status update is going to uplift the decision packages and really emphasize the importance that they have into this work moving forward. It's going to highlight the cost of quality care survey and the market rate survey report that was published in the last couple of months. And we're also going to identify any dependencies and associated timelines and moving this work forward successfully. Also, in the status update, we will be sharing a summary of the feedback and the engagement that has happened over the past year. And I'll share some more about what we learned here shortly in some future slides. The implementation plan is going to talk about the investments made in the 25-27 budget session, as that will make some accommodations to how we are able to move forward with our implementation plan. It will also highlight our options for distribution of living wages and benefits for our workforce. It will discuss eligibility options aligned for families paying no more than 7% of their family income. And it will also address the operational needs, any modeling, and then the overall recommendations for making this work successful. In both, we will also be referencing the cost of quality care recommendations that were presented from the early educator design team. This next slide highlights who's all been involved in this work. So DCYF has been working closely with Child Care Aware of Washington and SEIU 925 as part of our steering committee, but we haven't been doing this work alone. We've also been engaging with DCYF staff and attending meetings such as IPEL, ELAC, and provider supports, and also doing some statewide engagement with Washington Communities for Children. Parallel in that golden color, you'll see that Child Care Aware of Washington has also been doing an advocacy campaign for childcare, and that work is running parallel to what we are doing at DCYF. Child Care Aware is partnered with their early educator design team and 10 advocacy groups that make up their partner roundtable group that continue to inform their work moving forward. So this next slide is really our transition into the engagement feedback that we have received. There has been a lot. We've been actively engaging for, this whole past year. And so as we think about what our focus has been for these engagement sessions, these are kind of our high level of how we want to move forward. So we've been asking questions that will be focused on how do we ensure families have access to affordable, high quality childcare that meets their family's needs? How do we ensure that there's adequate facilities for expansion of the early care and education system? How are we supporting a thriving early care and education workforce? And how do we leverage data and align systems to maximize equity and effectiveness? And these also align with the direction that the Child Care Aware advocacy campaign is going. So the next several slides are going to consist of themes that we've heard in the different buckets. So when we think about access and affordability for families, several themes that came out included how do we expand outreach and community engagement for families? How do we build relationships with trusted community members to help share information? So this included like going to the doctor's offices, trusted partners within the community, and also advocates that we already work with. Well, there was several mentioning of how we can expand eligibility, and with the WCC eligibility expansion already, that is feeding into what we can do here. There was also a lot of feedback on how we can increase incentives for non-standard hour care. What does that look like as we think about how do we best serve the families who may need care outside of normal hours? Increasing resources and funding opportunities for those caring for infants and toddlers as we think about the youngest children needing care. And then as we think about the older children that need care, increasing options for school age care and summer care, knowing that they're not always needing full-time care year round. The next category was facilities. So themes that came up were developing resources and educational opportunities to understand funding and grants. There was many that participated and weren't aware of what resources were currently available. So there was a great, rich discussion that happened related to that. Additional themes included establishing partnerships with experts for referrals when it comes to facility expansion, purchasing, or conversion. Developing a family support team for non-ECAP families as we think about wraparound services and what may be needed for those that are not participating in ECAP programs, expanding professional development opportunities when working with infants and toddlers, and then creating a toolkit of resources that support facility expansion. One of the most simple asks of that was having like a checklist of what are the things that I need to know that I don't know, because we don't know what we don't know. And so those were some themes that came with facilities. The next category was compensation and professional development with providers. The biggest thing is pay staff a living wage. That is one of our goals that we would love to do. It was hard to go past this because this is a very real thing that is a challenge to our current workforce. Once we were able to think about what's beyond that, we really talked about professional growth within the career that we chose. So what are the supports and benefits of continuing a career in early care and education? What does that look like? Ensuring that there was access to education and training opportunities, and then also increasing that access. As we thought about our professional development, there was a request for increasing early achievers coaching supports and other technical assistance supports throughout the classroom and within the program as well. The last category that we had was thinking about integrative and inclusive classrooms. Themes that came up here were really emphasized on collaboration with other organizations to streamline our systems and applications, increasing access to comprehensive screening tools, and then increasing the special needs subsidy rates. The special needs subsidy rates also came up under the professional development category about many providers wanting additional training opportunities to better serve children in their programs that have complex and special needs for their care. I'm gonna pause. I don't see anything in the chat yet, but if you have questions, please let me know. We'll have designated time at the end as well. So we'll next transition into considerations. So as we're thinking about our initial recommendations, we are, as a steering committee with Child Care Aware Washington and SEIU 925, these are the things that we are considering as we make those recommendations for the implementation plan next year. So again, we really want to ensure families have access to affordable, high quality childcare that meets their need. The goal with our recommendations is that we will be able to then increase access to this type of care and that all families deserve. We want to ensure adequate facilities for expansion of the early care and education system. And this will be expanding access to these facilities and developing any additional supports and resources to meet the needs within the community. So recommendations will go forward in supporting that, and there's additional conversations happening around that. The next slide has additional considerations. As we think about supporting a thriving early care and education workforce, we really want to stabilize the existing workforce and recruit additional staff to support programs. We want them to feel supported and have the professional development opportunities that they need. And we really want to sustain them so that they are not just recruited, but they also stay long-term. In leveraging the data and aligning system to maximize efficiency and effectiveness, we want to integrate and streamline systems, creating inclusive environments for children, families, and providers. Our next steps after this, so while I mentioned we have the status update that will come out later this fall, we're also analyzing and reviewing the models and other products being developed by DCYF and Eco Northwest Eco Northwest is a subcontractor working for Childcare Aware Washington that is helping with some modeling for both sides of the work. We continue to have ongoing discussions with Childcare Aware Washington and SEIU 925 about the implementation plan and the status update. We'll have a lot of work in the next coming months to go from what are these considerations and how do we make them realistic recommendations to include in this implementation plan early winter, spring. We will continue to follow up with communities and groups that participated in the engagement. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're meeting regionally with Washington Communities for Children's regional networks to share what is it that we learned and what are our next steps. So it's very similar to what we're doing today. We are preparing for in the future for this implementation plan. So again, having those discussions of finalizing recommendations and how will those work. And then really thinking about phased implementation. So we know the first phase of implementation is directly connected to the decision packages that are submitted for the 25-27 biennium. And then we have to think about the what's next as we move this work forward. So I'm going to pause for questions. And I saw the question in the chat from Debbie. How does increasing living wages for educators have to do with the other big picture recommendations mentioned? So in order to increase access to care options for families, we really need to make sure that we have a sustainable workforce. And so we can't maintain our workforce without them receiving living wages. And so it's kind of a pull effect of how do we bring up living wages for staff and then also increase access, because a lot of programs right now are struggling to, either have full capacity with their programs or have enough staff for the number of children that they're serving. And so bringing staff up to the living wages that they deserve, that will help support increased access for families that need the care. So hopefully that answers your question, Debbie.
So more specifically, what are the recommendations to increase living wages for educators and early learning providers?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. So the goal is to reach that cost of quality care rate model, as that will uplift our subsidy rates and support the living wages for staff. The how is something that still needs to be identified, and it also will require investment by our legislators. So we will have that in our recommendations for the implementation plan, but I would say we're still having those conversations of how do we get to the cost of quality care. Lois is asking if there's a plan to put anything forward this legislative session, and what happens if capital gains is rolled back. So our phase 1 of implementation is really based on the decision packages that I mentioned earlier. So with ECAP entitlement and working connections eligibility expansion, those 2 decision packages will allow us to serve more children. And then as we increase to the updated market rate survey, the MRS rates, and having that different modeling, that will get us closer to the cost of quality care rate model. As to what happens if capital gains is rolled back, that is something we will have to address in the implementation plan as to what that will look like. So we have some time with the final due date on that to identify what happens in the legislative session as to what is invested or funded, and we'll have to adjust our action items from there. But it will not impact our recommendations of what we want to do moving forward. Senator Wilson, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people knew that both the subsidy rate and the co-pays are baked inside Fair Start for Kids. And so regardless of what happens, those things are now in maintenance budget, and the pieces that are ones that we will need to continue to advocate for should things go any direction would be those things that are subject to appropriations, like the infant toddler mental health funds, interpretation, translation, complex needs, those kinds of things. And I'll just also add, I know I'm having conversation, there's conversation around wage boards as well. So really taking this information and then creating a collective opportunity to think about what it looks like to move that forward. So it's not just a living wage, but a thriving wage as we think about things. So that movement is going to take time, but it is moving and it's happening. So, but I just wanted to make sure, especially as we look at the rebasing and things, those are now part of our maintenance budget, and that does not need to be advocated for every year as it has for so many years. Thanks to all of your advocacy.
Thank you, Senator Wilson. Going to Kim's question of what does the feedback opportunities look like between now with the fall status update and the June implementation plan? Kim, we are working with WCFC of what this engagement can look like, and working with them. And then we're thinking about it as a whole of what this can look like from DCYF. So I imagine coming back to ELAC and provider supports as well as IPEL will happen between now and June, and sharing not just, you know, what were these findings and the feedback that we heard, but when we are in a place to share those full recommendations, being able to come back and share those out. So I would say more to come on that, Debbie, or Kim, sorry, Debbie is right below. Yes, I would say we're still working on a clear plan to raise living wages, knowing that the state has to make that investment of how we can do that. So we will continue to have conversations about this, and Debbie, welcome any ideas that you have. Yes, we recognize that across the state, there is a lot of variance in what staff are receiving and what would be considered like minimum wage or a living wage, or even better, that thriving wage. And so getting to that cost of quality care is going to be a great step to get towards that. Any other questions or comments? Well, I will be around until we're finished. If there are any additional questions or comments, as we continue to move this work forward, just know we will continue to have these conversations, and hope that there will be an invite to come back in the future to share more about the progress as it's being made.
Thank you, Diana, for coming to ELAC and sharing all that information with us. Really helpful. And I'm just going to do one final check-in while you're here, just to make sure there are no remaining comments or questions for Diana before we move to our meeting close.
I do want to point out, Enrica, that there is a comment in the chat from Matt for those who may be on their phones. He said, I think it's a huge win that the early educator design teams frame in DCYF is the MIT Living Wage Standard. DCYF also sought and received federal approval to move to basing subsidy rates on cost to provide care. This puts the state in position to pursue living wages. The question is funding revenue budget. So just wanted to see how to share that out for those who might be on the phone. So you can see how all of this ties in.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Lois. I didn't see that in the chat, so I appreciate you I'm sharing that out with the group. So if there are no additional comments or questions, again, thank you, Diane, and thank you, everyone. And as we wrap up for the day, you see that Jessica has placed the link in the chat, just so we can get a sense from everyone how you felt today's meeting went for you. So if you take a moment and click on that link and provide us with some feedback, that would be great. Also, don't forget to share your feedback through our meeting reflection survey. We really do review all the feedback to help inform these processes. While you're giving your feedback, I'm just going to share that the next public meeting will be a joint meeting with provider supports, and that is scheduled for December the 3rd. And with that, just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you, everyone.